Hi, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to present. This is a joint presentation with myself just to start out, and then Jing Tang from Google will be taking over with a demonstration. So very much appreciates the opportunity and Google's support on this. So just to start, I'll set the context. Just to reset everybody's, for those that weren't able to join the previous AeHIN webinars on the SMART guidelines, I just wanted to provide a brief overview of what the SMART guidelines are to set the context. So WHO is embarking on a process to digitize all of the narrative guidance that comes out from WHO, the L1 layer, and to create different assets from those that makes it easier to create digital tools that are adherent to the guidelines to reduce the overall software development costs and time cycles to develop digital tools based on the guidelines, particularly as there's iterations. So the L1 level, we have the narrative guidance. The L2 level is essentially the business requirements, the workflows. The L3 is the FHIR implementation guide. So for those that were on the previous session with Jose, saw some aspects about building those. L4 is the actual executable code, the software tools that implement the SMART guidelines, and that'll be the focus of the conversation today. And L5 is looking at sort of dynamic guidelines, machine learning, artificial intelligence that we can apply to the data systems now that we've regularized data. There are a few guidelines I just want to mention that are probably of broad interest. One is the SMART guidelines for immunization that's about to be released. We're just going through our internal final review of that, which will cover routine immunizations, both from the clinical care campaign side. It includes COVID vaccinations. Is based on the International Patient Summary, which is another FHIR implementation guide. Next is the MCare platform, which is developing L2, L3, and L4 content for clinical care in emergency settings, including childhood vaccinations and basic primary care that's needed for reasonable to expect and to be deployed in an emergency setting. And finally is the digital documentation of COVID certificates, which is around COVID credentials, the QR codes that you see and for travel, and that FHIR implementation guide shows how to use that. And all of these are examples of SMART guidelines, and there's a lot of FHIR implementation guide resources that have been built to support this. And we'll see in a minute on one way to use these in a practical setting in the Android. To give you a sense of where we are and where we're going in terms of the SMART guidelines, you can see sort of a status progress of where we are. Others that we haven't mentioned that might be of interest are HIV, family planning, STIs, ANC, and we've got a number more that are in the pipeline or early stages of being developed. As we go forward with these SMART guidelines, we wanted to make sure that there is a full ecosystem of tools that are available to software developers and implementing partners to accelerate the adoption of SMART guidelines. And to this end, WHO has partnered with Google to support the implementation and the development of the backbone infrastructure around SMART guidelines, and particularly on the Android platform. If we look through where that fits in, in some of the work that Google is doing. The software development kit that Jing is going to talk about in just a minute is really working at the L3, L4 layer. So how can we take the FHIR implementation guides that we've seen being developed and actually run those on a Android platform? How does that interact with a backend server? And what is sort of the infrastructure that we need in place to very quickly take the FHIR implementation guides and develop software against them and not have to redevelop code across different applications, but what is sort of that common core. So with that, I'll turn this over to Jing for a demonstration of some of the work today.
So yeah, thanks again, Carl, for the intro, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm very excited to be here to share some of the work we've been doing in the last, I would say, couple of years now on the Android FHIR SDK. So just a quick intro to myself. My name is Jing. I was born in China, grew up in China, grew up in Beijing, and I've been working on the Android FHIR SDK project, as I said, for the last couple of weeks. But before that, I worked on various other projects at Google, including advertising pipelines and Android framework. So it's been a bit of a journey to move on to the healthcare space, but it's been an absolutely fantastic experience, really. I'm just going to jump straight into the content, and I think I have some slides to share, and I have a bit of a demo at the end of it. But I really want to leave enough time to have a conversation at the end, so hopefully it will be interactive. So if you have any feedback, any questions, please let's save to the end, and then we have enough time to go through those. So what is Android FHIR SDK? I think Carl mentioned a little bit. So the point of this whole project really is to make it very easy for developers to build offline capable applications on Android. So there's two main aims. One is to accelerate the adoption of interoperable standards. In this case, it's FHIR. I think I probably don't need to go into too much detail on the issues that we face in this space with the lack of interoperability. You know, systems can't speak to each other. It's really limiting the potential of the solutions we're all building, right? So by addressing the interoperability issue, we're hoping to really unlock a lot of the future use cases. So that's kind of the foundation of the two. But once the interoperability issue is being addressed, you know, we can really start thinking about some more advanced, interesting sort of clinical support use cases. So this is the second effort, second sort of aim of the Android FHIR SDK, which is to accelerate the evidence-based care, especially to using the smart and computable guidelines that some of the WHO has been building. So this is not a single effort. You know, we very much see ourselves as a group that enable the community to work on this together, right? So we have this open source code base, but there are contributors, and then we take feedback from people. There are various forums we're very active in, including the WHO's Computable Guidelines Working Group, but we also host a technical call every week. So on the right of this slide, you can just see there's some of the groups that we engage quite closely with, including ONA, IPRD, Argosoft, and of course WHO and Digital Square, and other contributors. And we also have individual contributors to the code base. So last year, ONA helped to run the Google Summer of Code program with our project. So we actually had loads of individual students or interns working on this project. So it's been a really exciting collaborative experience. So just to summarize again, you know, the point of this really, the Android FHIR SDK, the aim of this is to accelerate the development of FHIR-based digital health tools, specifically on Android. I think to think about it in a bit more detail, just to sort of go through the different sort of stages of our roadmap, I think there are probably three main things we're trying to do on the journey to reach the goals I just laid out. So the first one is to make FHIR available for offline use cases. So this really is about leveraging the common data model we have to promote interoperability, as I already touched upon, right? And offline first here is also a very important point, because we recognize that in a lot of the settings, connectivity is a big issue. So, and that's why paper has been such a good medium, right? But to really be able to replace paper and drive interoperability, we need to have offline capabilities on the mobile phone. So when health workers are not able to upload or download data, they can still carry out their tasks. And when they return to a place with connectivity, they can then sync the data with the server and carry on with their plan their next sort of tasks. So that's a really important core functionality of the FHIR SDK. Once the interoperability sort of issue is being addressed, there's then a lot of tools and infrastructure that is then made available to the developers. And I think Carl has mentioned a lot, and Jose, I believe in the previous presentation, he talked to some of the stuff that's being built around FHIR. There's a lot more actually. So what we're hoping is, by allowing developers to build applications on FHIR, you then automatically get a lot of these tools and infrastructure for free, and you really have a network effect of accelerating the development in this field. So yeah, so just a few examples, the FHIR questionnaire support, for example, and the terminology support like value sets, and then the IGs that have been developed by WHO and other entities. These are all tools that are available to developers. And also there's even more sort of software tools that are emerging, right? We quite often hear about additional tooling for software, for questionnaire authoring, or for CQR authoring. All these things are being developed. So hopefully, with everything coming together, it will be easier and easier for people to build apps. And then finally, the third sort of pillar, if you like, is essentially the North Star. We want to drive the quality of care, improve the quality of care by providing on-device decision support. So that's kind of the workflow part of the Android FHIR SDK, which I'll talk a bit more about in very soon. So this is about having the data available offline on the device. Then what can you do? Then you're able to take either smart guideline or computable guideline, the knowledge artifacts, if you like, CQL libraries, and then the device with the support of these knowledge artifacts can make decisions to help the health worker to deliver care. For example, you may be able to create a care plan. You may be able to create the immunization schedule when the health worker is seeing a patient. So these are the sort of the North Star that we're trying to drive in the long term. Coming back to sort of a bit more technical aspects of the SDK. So we have some of the design principles we have been adhering to. Some of these have been mentioned, so I'll try to be quick. But the first one is open source. I would like to say here that there are different types of open source projects out there. Some of the open source projects, you see that people write the code and then make it available on GitHub. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to use and difficult to make sense of it all. But our model, I think, is we try to be a lot more engaging than that sort of open source model. We don't want to just develop something and then chuck it on GitHub, right? So we want the entire development process to be open, to be transparent, to be engaging, and that's why we take a lot of external contributions in the code base. If you go to the repo on GitHub, you can see there's a lot of active discussions on issues and active PRs that we're looking at. So that's the model that we have been adopting, and that's what we want to continue to do, to really create an active community around the tool, because that's the only way we feel that can allow us to hear the right feedback to build a tool that is really useful to developers, rather than building something and throwing it out there, right? So FHIR native I've mentioned already. I'm not going to talk again. I think online offline use case I've also talked about in the workflow as well. Just about the building blocks. So just a really quick note on sort of these the last three, I guess, design principles. I think what we're trying to do here really is to create the building blocks. So we want developers to be able to come to the FHIR SDK and look at the different APIs, components, and probably pick and choose what is important to you. So you may have very different priorities when you building your application. You know, for example, you may care about structured data capture, or maybe you really care about saving data offline on device, right? So these are slightly different use cases. So we want to provide you modularized APIs, components, so you can pick and choose and start integration from different sort of integration points. So that's been one of the sort of principles we've been following as well. And then a little more technical, a little more detail, sort of the architecture of the Android FHIR SDK. So this is actually a slightly old diagram, but I think the idea here is very clear. If you look at the left, the box is the Android environment. And at the very bottom of it, that's powering everything, is the database that we have built. So this is a SQLite database, but we have written it in a way that allows it to store sort of FHIR documents, very similar to actually some of the design in the FHIR server. So that's the core of the SDK, you know, the database. And then from that database, you know, there are various APIs you can sort of pick and choose and start building your application. For example, the basic data access API is you know, what allows you to read and write to the database. You know, you say I have a patient resource or I have a observation resource, and I want to save that locally. That's what you need to use to achieve that. And then the search API, we've taken inspiration from the FHIR search spec, but this is a sort of programmatic search API. What you can do is, you know, for example, you can search for patients by name, search patients by name. You can search observations by which patient they belong to, and by the code. So it's very similar to the FHIR search RESTful API if you're familiar with that, but this is all local and programmatic. And we achieve that by creating indices when you first store any data into the database. And the indices we create, again, from the search parameters that's defined already in the FHIR standard. And then the workflow API is about driving clinical decisions. For example, if you have a CQL library, you want to, given a patient's history saved on the device, you know, in the form of FHIR resources, you want to make an inference or decide that what you want to do next to the patient, kind of create a care plan for the patient. So this is the part of the library that is that does that for you. So it's so this is probably the most nascent part of the SDK. It's still in the alpha stage. I'll talk a bit more about that. But you know, you're very welcome to have a look and try it out. And then the data capture API, this is the SDC structured data capture library that we have been building. Is actually a standalone library now. So what it does is it allows you to generate Android UI from FHIR questionnaires. So one thing that is really important, I think, about this part of the library, the part of the SDK, is that it really takes away a lot of the work from developers. So I think Android developers will know that building Android UI is actually not a trivial task. There's a lot that goes into creating the fragment activities and making sure that activity and fragment life cycles are implemented correctly, and dealing with configuration change and all that stuff. So it's not a trivial task to write Android UI. But what we have decided to do is to basically abstract that from developers, away from developers. So what you have to do is, if you have a FHIR questionnaire, we can take that FHIR questionnaire resource and then generate Android UI for you. And then when you fill out the questionnaire, you know, we can convert that result into a questionnaire response, and then we can also convert that into a FHIR resource. So a lot of the hard stuff that normally developers have to do to implement applications, we are trying to do that for you. So you can focus on more interesting stuff. You can focus on the things that is really making your implementation stand out. So that's what I wanted to sort of highlight in the data capture API part. And then finally, very important, we have the sync API that basically syncs the database content to the FHIR server in the backend. So that FHIR server could be an open source FHIR server. It could be Happy if you use Happy. It could be GCP if that's what you have chosen to use. So there's no hard requirement as long as it is a FHIR server, and that we think is really important because it avoids the problem of like lock-in, right? You're not sort of locked into one particular technology or provider. And that's the sort of the beauty and the use of the standard. So this is the kind of architecture diagram. So how do we translate this into the actual components and things you can use, right? I kind of mentioned already, but we actually have 3 libraries that you can depend on. So these are 3 sort of Maven targets on the Google Maven repository. I'll point you to the documentation a bit later to how to actually use these. But first of all, the data capture library, the SDC library. Sorry, the order is a bit different from the previous slide, but this is the bit where you can take to generate a questionnaire. So kind of if you listen to Jose's presentation, I think this is very, very relevant to that. Building that on Android, giving you that sort of entire UI generation part for free. I think that's really powerful for developers. Additionally, not just that, but also if you are tweaking, for example, the UI of your app, right? If you're changing the questionnaire, if you're changing a question, if you're changing the answers, the sort of the answer options to a question, and that entire process is now decoupled from the app development, right? So your clinical team can deal with that, and as we all know, sort of, it's difficult to schedule development cycle, especially when you have to deal with like sort of the lots of practical technical issues you have to fix, but then also there's a change of requirements that's happening at the same time. So by decoupling these 2 kind of workflows, we're really hoping that implementation teams can be more efficient, right? And then the second library is FHIR Engine. This is the core stuff, although you can use data capture separate from FHIR Engine as well, if that's what you choose to do. But the FHIR Engine would include the core database and data access API, the sync API, the search API. These are everything related to storing data offline and reading and writing data offline. So all these things in the FHIR Engine. So you can imagine a configuration where you use FHIR Engine and then use data capture library on top of that to create the UI, or maybe you use FHIR Engine, but you have your custom sort of UI components, and that's okay. Or you can have a configuration where you actually use the data capture library to generate, to use FHIR resources, but you may or may not actually save that in FHIR Engine. You may have additional different sort of storage on device or online. So that's all up to you, and that's kind of the point that I was making earlier on. It's a modularized component that you can pick and choose. And we have worked with developers who have adopted all these sort of different models of integration. And we encourage you to explore your way, whatever works for you. But obviously, ultimately, I think, what works the best is to have FHIR Engine, data capture, and workflow together. But really, to begin with, you may choose to integrate with parts of the SDK as a starting point. And then the workflow library, last, I think it's, as I mentioned, is probably the least mature part. It's currently in the alpha stage rather than the beta stage. But we've made a lot of progress. At the moment, we can already do operations such as evaluate, measure, and the care plan generation. So if you have some patient data on device, you could already try to either calculate some indicators or create a care plan for the patient. So these are the APIs that's still kind of morphing in the code base. We're working with the groups that's behind the development of the CKL infrastructure to improve the APIs right now. So there's a lot of changes that will be coming, but in the meantime, I really welcome everybody to go and take a look and give us feedback if you have any. Okay, so kind of putting all these things together, I kind of already touched upon it a little bit, but putting all these things together, what would a community health worker app look like, right? Obviously, again, you may not do this thing end to end in its entirety as shown in this diagram. You may do part of it to begin with, but this is kind of what we envisage the end state would look like. So first of all, you probably need some kind of questionnaire typically to collect the patient data. And that questionnaire is authored in FHIR. That will be a FHIR resource stored in the database, right? But when the community health worker opens the app, the thing that they see is the UI that is rendered using the FHIR questionnaire and the SDC library, the data capture library that we have written and currently in beta. So once you have that, the health worker can then input data and then submit the questionnaire. There might be some kind of validation ongoing in the questionnaire. They might be guided to correct any data that is not conformant to what the questionnaire is expecting. But then once that is done, the health worker clicks submit. Then that moves on to the next stage where the answers to the questionnaire is being stored in the on-device storage, right? So there is a process of with that data, we might drive, you might decide to create additional workflows and operations. For example, if the patient has certain conditions, you may do additional tests to them. That may trigger a different questionnaire for you to collect more data. So that's the additional workflow that is very much depending on the implementation. But then you will store those data as well to the on-device storage. And once that is done, the offline part is sort of complete. And then when you move on to an online, a place where there's connectivity, then the sync module of the Android SDK would actually trigger syncing with the FHIR server. So all the artifacts you have created, the FHIR resources you have collected in offline environments would be then uploaded to the FHIR server. And then likewise, you would download anything that you may have just first time seen from the FHIR server, right? If there's additional patients that's been created by other health workers or additional artifacts that you will need to drive your questionnaire data collection flow, then those things will be downloaded at that point. And these things are all configurable. So yeah, I think I'll take a really quick pause there just to make sure that there's no burning questions. If not, I will go to do a quick demo of some of the apps we've been building. But
just a few questions like how can the audience participate in the beta, and I think you answered the question already, how to configure the Android app and point it to an endpoint. So I think that's really what the app does. So I guess beta, how to join the beta. Over.
Okay. Yeah, I can say that. So that's the question is, do you configure the Android app to read from a FHIR endpoint? Yeah, you can do that. You do that when you set up the FHIR engine, the core library. Yeah, that's correct. So that's configurable by the application. So I'll try to take the following ones. How can we participate in the beta? I see that's a question. So you don't, there's no requirement to anything. It's open out there. You just have to go and you can clone. If you want to play with the Android FHIR SDK, you can actually go and clone the code base and play with it and try to build the demo app yourself. As long as you have the latest version of Android Studio, you can do that. But you can also just directly point to the artifacts that we have on the Google Maven repository. So that's just another dependency you add. So the dependency would be com.google.android.fhir.engine or data capture. So I will point you to that in a little bit, and at the end of the presentation, we'll have a few links to the code base, so you can look at how that can be done. I think that's it, right? Oh, there's another question. Is there any plan for iOS devices? No. So we, as a team, we are focused. We focus on Android devices. We focus on sort of the, I guess, low and middle income country settings. So we recognize that there's a lot of quite typically, is low and mid range devices that are typically being distributed and used by health workers. So we don't have an emphasis on iOS devices, and I believe there might be FHIR libraries written in Flutter that's more cross-platform, and we, I think if you need to use LS, sort of those things are the things you might want to look at. But for us, the reality is there's loads of Android developers out there. There's loads of Android apps that's being built, and that's kind of our primary focus. We want to support these developers. Cool. So with this, I think I will move on to the demo part. So I'm just gonna switch to this screen where I basically have a device connected to my laptop. And I'm just going to show a couple of demo apps we have built just to give you an idea sort of what is possible with Android FHIR SDK. These are also available in the repository, so you can go and build it yourself if you like. So the first thing I want to show is the FHIR Engine sample app. I'm gonna sort of move. I'm gonna demo on the device itself, so you won't be able to see my finger sort of moving, but I'm just going to tap this app. So this is an app that we have built using the SDK and especially the FHIR Engine library and also a bit of the SDC library. So when you open the app, what the app does is actually pull up a list from its local storage. So each record you see here is a patient that's a patient resource that is saved in the local FHIR Engine database, right? So you as a developer, again, don't have to do much. You don't have to write the database. You don't have to worry about sort of synchronization. You don't have to worry about sort of a data model. All you have to do is you create a patient resource that is, there is already a Java class that's available for you. And you create that, you can save it to the database. And then, when the app is opened, you can pull up the list of patients you have, right? So you can, so if you go, let's just quick look at like one patient. You go into the patient, there's a patient card. This is a UI that is just built in the application. You can, there's basic information that's coming from the FHIR resource. Yeah, and then you can search by the patient name. Again, this is just custom app UI. You can change the UI and search by patient address or anything else. But let's just say as AL. You can see like when I'm typing, it's automatically filtering out the patient name. And this search is not done via UI. This is not a UI search, right? It's not filtering the list on the UI level. It's actually making an additional database query to fetch the patient name that starts with ALFR. So this means that you can actually search more deeply on other fields. For example, you can search by date of birth. You can search by other fields of the patient, even if those fields are not available or displayed on the UI, right? So there's a sync button here. So when you click sync, you try to start syncing with a happy test. Oh, there's some issue right now, but could be the connectivity. But you'll try to sync with the happy test server that we have. And this can happen in the background, right? So when you collect new patient data, it will be automatically uploaded, and then new patients on the server will be downloaded. I want to quickly look at maybe creating a patient. So if you click the plus button, you go into add patient screen, and then you can sort of fill out all these details. I'm not going to go through that. There's quite a few. But the point is when you click submit, that will allow you to, that will actually create a new patient from the questionnaire response of this page. Then you had a new record in this patient, in this patient list, right? So there's actually a few things that's happening there. So first of all, a new questionnaire is rendered, and then when you click submit, the questionnaire response is collected with all the answers in it. And then additionally, on top of that, there's an extraction process, which is taking all the answers to the questionnaire, converting that from a questionnaire response in FHIR to an actual FHIR patient resource, right? So that process is also supported by the SDC library. As long as your questionnaire is authored in a way with hints of different fields going to different patient fields, then that process is very, very easy for you to do as app developer. And then just to demonstrate this a little bit as well. So if you go to a patient and then you click the edit patient, then this questionnaire now is actually filled with the patient data, right? So it's filled with the existing patient data. And this is a process that's called population in SDC, in structured data capture. So the point of this is that if you want to edit a patient, you probably want to fill the questionnaire with some existing patient data so you don't have to type everything again, right? So in this case, if I change Alfred to, Alfred, and then add 2Ds and I submit it, you can see that the name will be updated. And then, that's again extraction process. Then we take the answers and then translate that into a patient resource. So see, kind of there's this back and forth process that's handled in the SDC, specified in the SDC IG flow. It's all kind of fairly automatic for you to implement. And we believe this is something that is really going to drive velocity for developers. So this is the sort of the demo app. Just really quickly, we have a screener sort of questionnaire. You can go through the screener, fill out different sort of medical history questions, and then at the end of it, you can make a decision about the risk level of the patient and see if you want to do anything, take additional measures about the patient. So that's something else that we have built into the demo app. Again, this demo app is not bug-free. You can see that there's still polish that we can do. But the point is really just to show you how simple it is to build an app. I mean, if you look at the code of the demo app, it's actually not that much. A lot of the core stuff is handled by the libraries. So if you're building something similar to this, right? Really, the goal is that you should be able to do that very, very easily by putting a few of the APIs from the SDK together. So this is the first app I want to show you, the FHIR Engine sample app. The second one I want to show is the structure data capture library. So this is something we built to showcase what we have support for in the SDC library. There's two main screens. There's a different components on the components page with all the components we support. These are the different widget types in the SDC IG, and then we have the layouts page. So these are some of the different questionnaire layouts we have implemented or are implementing at the moment. So just maybe have a look at a couple of examples in the components. For example, if you go to single choice, this is a sort of single choice question is probably very common in a lot of questionnaires. You can choose one, and then the other ones will be deselected. But if you go to submit, then you can see this is the what the JSON would look like after you submit the single choice question. So it will be part of a questionnaire response with the answer being encoded in the JSON. So let's have a look at another one. Perhaps we can look at a date picker. This is something that's quite common as well, but we have made this into a widget, so you can just use it very, very easily. Basically, it's an input, but if you click the calendar button, this is material sort of UI. You could either type things yourself, or you could actually just navigate this, and then just by clicking the date to really quickly input a date. You may choose something that's in the past, and then that will be populated into the question. So this is all, again, this is you don't have to write any of this code as a developer. This is all part of the SDC library. So quickly into the layouts. So at the moment we have implemented two layouts. So that's the default layout and the paginated layout. The review and read-only layouts are still in progress. So in the next SDC library release, we expect to have those two. But just look at the default layout. This is a default questionnaire, very similar to the screener questionnaire I showed you earlier. Everything is on the same page. You can answer some questions and then submit. And the paginated one is a bit different. Again, we're using a slightly different font type here. Just don't worry about that. But essentially, you have the previous, next buttons. You can go back and forth, answer the questions. I think this is probably slightly more intuitive for devices with smaller screens when you don't have a lot of real estate on one screen. Yeah, so these are the two demo apps I wanted to show. And I want to go back to the slides, actually. Yeah, there's some screenshots of the demo apps. Very welcome to take a look at them. I just want to sort of highlight, I know we don't have a lot of time left. I want to leave some time for Q&A, but we have the GitHub repo. Again, as I said, it's very active. We have a lot of external contributors writing code actively. So please go and take a look and raise any issues in your integration. Any feedback is welcome. So yeah, and also the other thing that I would really encourage people to do is to look at other people's PRs and code, just for you to get a bit more familiar with the code base if you want to start some integration. I think that's a good way to start. We also host a weekly developers call on Thursday. I think it's 8:30 UK time. We typically have 4 or 5 different groups joining with about 20 developers each week. These are the people who are making active contributions, and then we're talking about very technical issues in that call every week. So if you feel like you will benefit from listening in or participating, please do let us know, and we'll add you to the meeting. Yeah, there's the QR code for the code base, but I actually want to just really quickly also show you something. So this is the front page of the GitHub repo, right? But I wanted to show you the wiki page we have. So for people who are looking into integrate with the SDK, I think if you go to the wiki section of the GitHub repo, there's a section called Developer Guides. This is what's I think is the most useful for people. So for example, if you want to use the data capture library, just click into this, and then it will explain to you what you have to do and how you can start integrating with the library with very sort of detailed code samples. So if you have any questions, hopefully this will answer most of it. But if you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us in one of the ways we have highlighted. Again, the FHIR engine library, we have a little bit more documentation here as well. How do you start using the library, sort of managing FHIR resources, read and write, and then search for different FHIR resources that's stored locally. So these are all code samples provided when you integrate. So just a quick note, some of these things are being revamped. So we are sort of restructuring some of the wikis to make it more intuitive, easier for you to navigate. So there will be changes, but the content is mostly already there. So feel free to go and take a look. And I think that concludes what I wanted to say. Yeah, so we can do some Q&A. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jing. So Jing, is the app already installable from the Play Store, or it's still an APK?
Yeah, so this is not an application. This is a set of libraries. So in order to use the library, what you have to do is when you're building the Android app, you just reference the Gradle, the Maven artifacts, right? So in your dependencies, you just have to add another one. So I know a lot of people probably use different Android libraries already, the Jetpack libraries, other Google libraries or third-party libraries. But we're just saying that to use Android SDK, you just have to add another line there, so you can start using this. So this is not APK. It's not an app. The apps we have, the demo apps we have on the code base, they are not published on Play Store. What you can do is just to clone the repository, and then you can just build repository the demo apps locally, and then you can make changes to it and play with it. So that's the purpose of it. The demo apps are not, again, the demo apps are not built to be used as a reference app, right? So it's just there to demonstrate how you can put things together. So we don't want people to take the demo apps and use it in production, and that's why it's not published that way. It's published as part of the code base, so you can build and play with SDK.
Okay, so it's for developers for now, not yet for the general public.
Yes, this is all for developers. Yeah.
So would you, because the people in the audience are actually into patient nurse, general public, or clinicians. So I think they need to partner with a developer if they want to get access to the beta part.
I'm not sure I totally understood the question, but I'm assuming that, so one assumption we have is that with the health programs that's typically run, there will be local implementers or developers who are taking
Yes.
care of the tech side of things. And these are the developers we are targeting at, we are trying to help. So that's our assumption. I don't know if that answers your question. Please do come back if you.
Yes,
If
yes.
that wasn't
Thank you. Yeah. So do we have any other questions from the people in the audience? Jing, you showed components and layout. That's a separate app, right? Or it's really just to demonstrate how the different controls, form controls render.
Yeah, so that's a app. Maybe I can. So if you go back to the Android Fire Stick, I'm gonna post the link in the chat. So the Android Fire Stick repository, if you look at that, the app with the components and layouts is called catalog. So if you browse into the catalog directory, and if you have Android Studio, if you clone the code base, you should be able to build the catalog app. It's just a very standard Android app that has a dependency on the SDC library we have built.
So Jing, I'm just trying to put the previous hours, the previous session. That's more on the design of the structured document and the questionnaires on the server side. And Jose is helping us convert our paper forms into questionnaire resources. And your app is on the field side, where this would be used by community health workers. And those Android apps would then be configured to point to the FHIR resource that we have on the FHIR server. So these two webinars are actually go hand in hand, but it will require two teams. One team is working on the FHIR server side and the other team is working on the Android app side, or can it be the same team? Or is that too much work for one team?
I think you probably would have some kind of division of labor in your development teams. Typically, some people would focus on the server-side components, and some people probably would focus on Android or whatever client platform you might have, right? Depending on their experience. But I think what you said about the workflow is exactly right. So this is kind of the extension of what Jose, I believe, has presented. So the point is, once you have created those questionnaire resources, once you have created those artifacts, then those things can be used with SDK to create your application, right? So the model used to be that app developers have to write different screens for different questionnaires, but now they don't have to anymore. If you have the questionnaire that Jose has helped you develop, then you can just download that questionnaire, and then your UI will change depending on what the questionnaire content is. And that, we believe, is a huge productivity gain for developers. It's basically taking a lot of work away from you, so you can focus on other things.
Yeah, and the questionnaire that is on the FHIR server will render on the Android app. Without a lot of work anymore, and that makes it easier to distribute the latest forms or questionnaires from the ministry.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine if the questionnaire is changing. If you need a different questionnaire, then you don't need to go back to your development team and go through another development cycle to, I don't know how long that would take, 2 weeks, maybe 2 months to rebuild the app. What you have to do is basically you point the app to a different URL endpoint, no matter however you want to update the questionnaires, then you point to a different questionnaire, then your app will change. So this is the kind of dynamic kind of workflow that we imagine that would happen. Yeah.
So this might sound like a stupid question because I'm not a developer. Why not just use a browser to render the FHIR questionnaire on the
I mean, this is something that again, we are focusing on Android native applications, right? I'm not saying that we will solve all the platform problems. If your environment is just entirely web, and I think you probably have different solutions. But what we're looking at really is the use case where community health workers are taking, or even facilities, they need Android tablets or Android phones, and then they're in an environment where they want native applications, and the native applications might be in a position where there's no connectivity.
Yes.
So in all these situations, right, we are providing you with a solution where you can, run the questionnaires offline, you can store data offline, and then when you come back online, you can sync with the server. But if that is not your context at all, if your context is that you always have connectivity, and then you have a desktop, then of course please do use build your web solution, and that's absolutely fine. But if you do have Android components to your system, if you do need an Android app, then we are hoping that Sdk can address your needs.
Got it.
Yeah.
Jose made a comment. Indeed, while it is possible that the same team will do everything, the tooling ecosystem has been improved to allow division of work. Yeah, same thing as Jing mentioned. It is possible to use browser-based questionnaire renderers. If we do that, then you have to handle the authentication, storage, etc. It depends on the architecture you want. Okay. Right?
Yeah, I think Jose is exactly right. Yeah.
And
it's
maybe just
please go.
Maybe just one comment. So you saw Jose's sort of set of tooling and sort of where we went with that, and then what Jing has presented. And now that we've got those questionnaires, how do we actually start pushing them out into an Android app? That is a whole workflow, and maybe in a future session we can talk about WHO's plans on a smart guidelines exchange that will help connect the L1 to the L2 to the L3 to the L4 and simplify some of these workflow steps and processes and make it easier and provide the tooling to say, okay, here's a base smart guideline. Let's look at the adaptation for a particular country and use a lot of the tools that are out there to really reduce that software development time and so there, even though some of this is manual at this point, we do want to get to a point where we can make all of this as automatic as possible.
Okay, Kurt. So maybe we can schedule something in the future when you're ready to show that development. All right. Okay, thank you, Carl. Thank you, Jing. We've reached the top of the hour. Very useful. We will start looking for other developers because we're mostly clinicians here. And probably join one of the Tuesday meetings just to get a sense of what we need in terms of skills on our side at the country level to participate in this program. So thank you to Carl and to Jing and to Jose, and we'll see you in Jose's next session, part 2. And just to quickly just inform everyone, healthdataprinciples.org has the principles for health data governance. Please visit that website. So good night, everyone. Thank you. We'll see you in the next session with Jose. Bye. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Goodbye.